Welcome to Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and it's another impromptu live stream. We'll see if anybody joins us. It is coronavirus everywhere, so I have a feeling there's a lot of you out there with nothing to do. So, to begin this stream, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to do a bit of a channel update, just some little stuff at the beginning. I'm going to talk about how I got into the aquarium hobby. And then at the end, we're going to answer a lot of your viewer questions. So we're going to put all the questions off till the end. To begin with, it's just going to be kind of story time and update time. But it's Monday. I'm off of work. So that's awesome. So far, my work is considered essential. I work in food production. So I personally like having a lot of food on the shelf. So we're keeping that going. I'm really hoping that continues because I don't know about you guys. I like going to the store and having food on the shelves. So it's my day off. So let's talk about the channel. To begin with, channel's doing great. I've had a lot of comments about some of the ads that go along with my channel. So it is political season in the United States, and I don't pick the ads that go along with my channel. So I've had a lot of complaints that there are political ads with my channel. I have nothing to do with that. I cannot choose which ads go with it. So if you're streaming pretty much anywhere, you're gonna see political ads, and there's nothing I can do about it. So sorry about that. As far as Mile High Reefers goes, I try to keep this as non-political as possible. This is a place for anybody who's into aquariums. That's all we're about. The only political stuff I get into is if it directly affects the hobby. So that's as far as I go with politics. So then next up, let's talk about what's kind of going on with some of this coronavirus in the local stores. We're not going to go crazy with it, but what we are going to talk about are local stores right now are having to deal with this virus, right? Because you just can't go to the store and buy what you want. But what I've been noticing, and I've been talking to a lot of the local store owners, is they are really stepping up to provide you, the viewers, with the products, the fish, the animals that you want and need. So a lot of stores are offering some pretty good discounts right now. They're offering delivery services. So that's all really great stuff. So take advantage of that. Support your local stores. Most of them are small mom and pop open businesses. And considering they're offering delivery services, I think you might be able to buy from your local store, get a better deal, and have the stuff delivered to you faster than if you bought on Amazon or any of the big, huge web commerce sites. So support your locals during these hard times. And that's kind of as far as we're going to go because everybody's in a different position right now. Some of us are kind of business as usual, and some of us are really struggling. So for those of you out there, I really hope things go well for you. So that's kind of the channel stuff. I put it at the beginning so that the people who watch this later can see it. So now let's kind of get into story time. So I've been keeping fish for a long time. My first real experience starts when I'm about 16, but I have always loved animals. When I was a little kid, I was obsessed with elephants and dinosaurs. I loved animals. So anytime we were out and about, I would want to go to a pet store. I loved animals. I loved fish. I loved all of it. So one of my earliest memories of a pet store is in downtown Greeley. We had this really cool store. I can't remember if it was in the basement or if it was the walkway above the basement that you went into the store, but it was really cool because you'd walk in, they had this huge piranha. It's probably not as big as I remember, but in my, I don't know, 3-4-year-old mind, that thing was insane. It was huge. It had the sign on telling you not to tap the glass, and it was the coolest thing. This store probably isn't as cool as I remember it, but this is probably like 1985. Saltwater was relatively new. Nobody was keeping corals. And this store in our little podunk town had really cool freshwater. They had the exotic freshwater. They had saltwater fish. They even had seahorses. And the fact that a person could keep seahorses when I was a little kid just blew my mind. And I absolutely loved it. I wanted seahorses so bad. My parents were not fish keepers. So seahorses were not something that we were ever going to get. And at the time, I just could not understand why. So I didn't get seahorses, and there's just nothing I can do about that. I was a little kid. I wasn't gonna be able to pay for it. My parents weren't into it. But I'll tell you the story of my first fish, and it's a sad story. I was in first grade. I was playing in my front yard, and this kid comes walking by. He has this bag of fish. So I walk up to him. He's just this little kid. It's like, wow, you have a bag of fish. Where did you get all of these fish? And he's like, I caught them in the local river. Well, where my parents still live in the same house, there's not a river nearby. So I have no idea to this day where this kid caught these fish. Little tiny minnows. But I was asking about it. He's like, oh, hey, do you want one? And I said, sure. So I'm first grade. What is that? 6, 7 years old, something like that. He just reaches his hand into the bag and hands me a fish. I don't have a fish tank. I don't have any means of taking care of a fish. I was so excited though. I got a fish. I've always wanted a fish. I've been going to these fish stores. I've been looking at these fish, and I got a fish. He's in my hand. Your hand isn't the best place to keep a fish, it turns out. I was in first grade. I had no idea how to keep a fish. Here's what I knew about fish. They need to be in a water. So I ran around to the backyard, and I grabbed my little Halloween bucket. It was orange. It had the jack-o'-lantern on it that you'd take trick-or-treating. I grabbed that. I filled it up with water, threw the fish in it. I ran inside. I told my parents, hey, I just got a fish. This kid was walking by, and he gave me a fish. And my mom's just kind of looking at me like, what are we going to do with a fish? And she's just basically is like, oh, that's great, but we got to go to the store. So we went to the store, we ran our errands, we did our stuff, and I come home and my fish is basically dead. Yeah, go figure. You take a fish, you throw it from the bag into freezing cold water and just leave it there. Yeah, my fish died. I was so sad. That was my first fish. It's a horrible story. It's a terrible story, but you know what? I thought I'd capture it here because so many of us want something that we're not ready for. And it's about holding back on that. And I got to learn that in first grade. I feel so sorry for my first grade teacher that next day. I was just distraught at school as a little first grader. I still remember like laying on my desk crying because my fish died. I had a fish for like minutes and I was so sad about it. But that's kind of how it went. It sucked, but I learned an important lesson. Unfortunately, I killed a fish. So my next fish tank is almost as dumb as that one. We have lots of local parks, like I think most of the world does. And I was out playing and I saw this little school of like baby catfish swimming around. So I caught some of them. And I caught some. I was with my grandmother at the time. I don't remember how I got them home, but I caught like 5, 10 of them, something like that. We went to the store. She bought me some food. I had a 10-gallon tank from some tadpoles I had tried to keep before. And I put them in the 10-gallon tank and they did terribly. Yeah, I had no idea how nitrogen cycles worked. I had no idea how any of this worked. I didn't know about oxygenation. So within like a day, the catfish are all swimming at the top, gasping for air, like dying. So I ended up just catching all the fish. I might have lost 1 or 2 and taking them back to the pond and letting them go. It was really a good learning process for me though, because it kind of taught me to learn and do research before doing something like that. You just can't get the animal. You got to actually do it. So I learned my lesson from that. It was kind of another sad story, but at least this time, most of the animals lived through it. By the way, I do not recommend going out and catching animals. This is something I did when I was really young, really dumb. There's a lot of legal restrictions on what you can catch and keep and all of that kind of stuff. So don't do that. That's kind of how I got my first stuff. And you know what? That's the wrong way to do it. Get it from a reputable dealer. Make sure what you're doing is eco-friendly and illegal, because you can get in a lot of trouble harvesting the wrong stuff. And every place is going to be different. So my next tank is a slightly better story, but it starts off real bad. And I've kind of told some of these stories before, but hey, bear with me. We're all down for coronavirus. What else do we got to do? So my next tank I got when I was 16 years old. I'd gotten a job at Well County Garage, which was at the time the Pontiac, Buick, and GMC dealer. I was the lot boy. So I was the guy washing the car, cleaning up, doing that kind of stuff. So I had a friend there who was talking to me about his fish tank. He had a little 20-gallon, 29-gallon, something like that. And it just sounded so cool. And I was finally at a point where I had some money, right? I had a real job. I had money. So I decided to buy a fish tank. I went to the store. I bought the biggest fish tank I could afford. I really wanted something huge. So I bought a 55-gallon, which really for a tropical fish for me at the time was a pretty good size. I got the full aquarium kit. It had the under gravel filter, the heater, everything that goes with it. So it was pretty cool. So I came home, started setting it all up, put it together, grabbed my bucket, filled it up in the sink, dumped it in, realized that it's going to take me about 100 years to fill that tank with that stupid little bucket I was trying to fill it with. So I realized there was a hose out back. I could run it up through my bedroom window and I could fill that tank with the hose from the water outside. Who cares if it's cold? We got a heater, and in a day or two, it'll be ready to go. So I filled that tank up with the hose outside. It worked beautifully. Everything was fine. The tank looked like it was doing great. It warmed up to temp. So in a couple days, I went to the store. I bought 6, 7 fish, whatever it was that the store recommended I put in the tank to begin with. Because remember, at this point, I was a complete novice. I didn't really have a fish tank. And this is 1999. I couldn't just grab my cell phone and research stuff. It was pretty limited internet at this time. So it was still a lot of books. And really, a lot of us were learning from the stores. So I came home, I put my fish in. They seemed like they were doing fine. I got up the next day. All my fish were dead. Yeah. I had a really hard start to fish keeping. So at this point in my life, of all of the fish I've ever had, I've basically killed them all, except for those catfish I took back. So I went to the store, I talked to them. We came up with the idea that I need to do 100% water change on this. We don't know what happened. Do not use the hose from outside. My guess is that there were some pesticides or fertilizers or something on that hose. Because why else would all the fish die? The water is the same water that'd be coming from the inside. So my guess is that hose had something on it that killed everything. So this time, I did the hard work and I took the buckets and I filled the tank and I waited several days. I ran the under gravel filter. I did everything that had to be done and it worked. It was amazing. I had fish alive in my bedroom. This may not sound like a huge success story, but to me, that was the biggest thing. Like, ever since I was a little kid, I had wanted fish. Finally, at 16 years old, after killing so much and doing so much wrong, I had living fish. So keeping living fish for me became an obsession. It was the coolest thing. I would dump so much time and money into my tank. I filled that first tank up pretty quick. I had the tropical, it was just your basic tropical fish setup. I put all of the plants in. I filled it with as many fish as I could. Then I got bored. So I bought another tank. I bought a 10-gallon tank. put the light on it. It was kind of a dumb tank, right? Because it had the light, but it used the old incandescent bulb. So every time the light came on, the tank would overheat, and it was really stupid. I don't recommend incandescent bulbs for a 10-gallon tank. It was a terrible thing. But once I made some mods to the hood and fixed that with a fluorescent bulb, the tank actually did really good. What was cool about this tank is I was using it for weird purposes. I had the rock in there and the plants, but I was putting fish in there for reasons I don't remember at the time. But I put my zebra danios in this tank, and it was pretty cool. I put the zebras in. I think I had 3 of them. They swam around. They did good. And then, for whatever reason, I took them out. And I just left the tank for a few days. Well, after a few days, I noticed there's all these little fish swimming around in there. I accidentally bred zebra danios. Turns out the way you breed zebra danios is you put them in their own tank, a male and a female. The female needs to be gravid. She'll release her eggs into the rock. The rock is necessary to keep the danios from actually eating the eggs. Well, they went down in the rock. I took the danios out, so the fry didn't get eaten, and I accidentally bred danios. So I had this tank with little baby danios. I grew them up, and it started to get like overly full. I ended up with like hundreds of danios. It was crazy. So then I was still obsessed with freshwater fish. I wanted saltwater, but oh, who can afford that? It's crazy. Plus, it looked really hard. So I bought another 55-gallon tank. I found one at a garage sale. Came with like tons of stuff. Like, I guess the previous owner had passed away, so I bought his tank. I bought his tank and a bunch of his old gear, like years worth of stuff. So I set up this other 55-gallon tank. I put piranhas in it. In my opinion, these days, piranhas are really a dumb fish to keep. They don't do a lot, and they kill each other. They kill anything around them. But to feed the piranhas, I do something I really, even today, feel bad about. I fed them all those danios. I was so overstocked with danios. I had like an unlimited amount of danios with the ability to make more. So I just put the danios in the piranha tank, and eventually most of them got eaten. So that was kind of that tank for a long time. The other tank was kind of my show tank. It was in my bedroom at my parents' house. And I did a lot of stuff with it. I started getting into a little more advanced fish. I bought a pretty good sized African long-nosed cat. Yes. Too big of a fish for too small of a tank. I get that now. I didn't know it at the time, but really he did good in that tank. He really did good. So that was kind of what I did until I was about 19 years old. Actually, I purchased my first house the day after my 19th birthday. So when it came time to move, I lowered the water the day before. I left the air bubblers in and everything, but I lowered the water level pretty low so that come moving day, I was ready to move this tank. This was a really dumb idea. I woke up the next morning and my African long-nosed cat was dead. Everything else was fine, but the long-nosed cat was dead. My guess is it was a lack of oxygen. Water level was relatively low, big fish, relatively small tank. I think he just used up all the oxygen. I have the bubblers in there. I just don't think it was enough for that fish. So I felt really bad about that. It kind of sucked. Anyways, went to my new house, set them up. I had a fireplace like right in the center of the living room. I put a 55-gallon on each side, which I thought was a pretty cool setup. One side had piranhas, the other was the tropical fish. But the tropical fish eventually began to dwindle. I was, worried about work and house stuff and all that kind of fun stuff. So I ended up going and buying 2 big Oscars. Oscars, to me, were the coolest fish. I put them in there. They did great. The thing I hated about big Oscars was the Oscars would grab every plant I put in there and move it around. They'd pick up the rocks and they'd do their own scape. So I had these beautiful fish with this ugly tank, the Oscars would go in there and change everything up, and it was so annoying. So that's what I hated about the Oscars. Now I would just do things differently. I'd do a rockscape, stuff that they're not going to move around, mess with. But at the time, I didn't really know how to deal with it. So I put two big Oscars in there, and then I ended up buying a pretty good sized Jack Dempsey. I mean, they're pretty aggressive, but beautiful fish, did really well with the Oscars. And that's pretty much what this tank was for 3 or 4 years. Couple things I did with those tanks that I thought was pretty cool is each one was under a window. So when it came time to do the water changes, I could just drain the water out of the back window, which really helped me out because I don't know about you guys. I hate carrying buckets of water. This way I only had to carry the buckets from the sink to the tank, not both ways. So that was pretty cool. So I did fresh water for quite a while. And then 2006, I know I've told this story. That's when I started in saltwater. I set up a 29-gallon tank, and it really did pretty well for a long time. So 29-gallon tank. I ended up having T5s on it to begin with, or no, power compacts to begin with. But the lighting fixture died, and like 6 months is one of those cheap, crappy eBay Odyssey ones. Absolute garbage. So then I went with the JBJ Viper Metal Halide. Actually, a super cool light. The only thing I don't like about it is it didn't have any sort of moonlighting. If you're like me, so much of the action happens at night. I love going and looking at my tank at night, watching all the streamers come out of your corals and stuff. It looks cool watching them just open up and having that different effect at night. Plus the colors under the deep blues and the UVs look awesome. But that was something I didn't have at the time, but it was still really cool. I did have a little blue flashlight, which was pretty sweet. So I could look at that. So that tank did really good for like 6-8 months. And then every coral I put in there died. And it was the most annoying thing. And I could not figure out why. I'd buy a coral, I'd put it in, and it would just die. I would take the water to be tested, and nobody could figure out why my tank wouldn't keep coral alive. So the reason turned out, oh, we'll get into more of that. So I couldn't figure out why I couldn't keep coral alive. And it was the most frustrating thing. So eventually I gave up on trying to keep coral. To me, at that time, keeping coral alive appeared to be akin to witchcraft. I had the gear. I had put like a lot of money into this stupid little 29-gallon tank. And all I was really keeping in there was a clownfish. I'd put other fish in there and they'd done okay. But Nemo, my little clownfish, who I still have today, was the first fish in the tank, and he did fine. But really nothing else did well. And I couldn't figure out why. So this tank was basically a clownfish, one clownfish only tank for 5 or 6 years. Finally, in 2012, I started watching a lot of people like New York Stilo and LA Fish Guy and Mr. Saltwater Tank and Ricketts Reef, who is actually back. I love that. But I started watching these guys, and I realized that keeping coral wasn't witchcraft. It could be done. So I learned so much from watching YouTube and just being obsessed with this hobby that I really decided to try again. This time I bought a 90-gallon system. So that 90-gallon system I bought used on Craigslist. It came with pretty much everything I needed to set up, which was pretty nice. It was like $450, but to have your tank, your skimmer, everything you need, it was actually a decent deal. So I set it up, and with it came a hydrometer. So I just stuck it into my 29-gallon just for giggles, and my salinity was 1.031. I've been shooting for 2.5, 2.6. My other hydrometer was showing 2.5, 2.6. I had failed for reefing at 5 or 6 years, killed countless numbers of corals because of a bad hydrometer. So that really sucked. And that's really why I started Mile High Reefers. It was all about me learning so much from the hobby that I wanted to share what I learned with everybody else because it was so important to me. So that's kind of my intro into fish, all the way back from when I was just an infant to through freshwater and up to saltwater. And you guys all know saltwater. So let's kind of open this up for questions. So it looks like there's about 17 of you out there. So if you got questions, feel free to throw them up. Let's see who we got up online. We got Goldslinger. Hello. We got Bahama Lima Coral. Good morning. Let's see, we got a lot of just good mornings. Oh, Rogue's on here. Hello, Rogue. You guys know Rogue, my buddy Darren with the big 600-gallon. I really want to get out and walk to Washington to see you, Rogue, but this coronavirus is not making that easy. So that's kind of a problem. Okay, we got Jonathan Ingram. My first saltwater is a 120-gallon Aqua One. It has 2 years on it now. Love it. Just wish I had not put clowns in for the first fish, but small tank. What else can you put in a small tank? So it says it's a 120L. That must be the brand. So small tanks, I love clown gobies. Clown gobies are some of my favorites. There's a lot of cool little fish you can put in there. Small chromies do pretty decent in there. Little damsels like the sapphires, they do decent in small tanks. So I really like those kind of fish. So yeah, those are great little fish. Small tanks are fun. Me personally, when it comes to small tanks or your nano style tanks, I'm much more into putting coral in them. The fish actually seem like they're harder to keep in small tanks because saltwater tend to like bigger tanks. Really small tanks, like I had a little 5-gallon, even clownfish get a little small for a 5-gallon. So that's kind of where we end up there. So what do you guys think about this coronavirus in reefing? Is it going to be a problem for us? I mean, I really don't know. It sounds like they're going to keep things going as far as pet stores and aquarium stores being considered essential. So it sounds like going forwards, we're going to be able to get the supplies we need. So we shouldn't need to hoard. We shouldn't need to do anything like that. But it makes me wonder with the flight changes and restrictions and all of that kind of stuff, what is that going to do for the imports of coral and stuff like that? That'll all be interesting to see how it plays out. Big thing I'm seeing right now that gives me hope is the local stores and the local people are trying so hard. There's a lot of companies out there doing good stuff. So I think we're going to be okay. Amazon's hiring like 100,000 people. They're probably not the ones I'd be buying all my stuff from right now just because I love my locals. This is going to be a lot harder for your small local store than it is for Amazon. So me personally, I'm going to support my locals. Plus, I'm seeing awesome deals on stuff right now. I mean, I'm looking at my local stores. They're putting like 20-25% off on some of their saltwater. They're offering delivery. And I'd be willing to bet you call these guys up, you offer to FaceTime, they'll probably they'll probably let you pick your livestock out like live and in person. It could be really cool and super convenient. I don't know how many stores are doing that, but as far as local stores delivering, Greeley's Animal Attractions delivering, which is pretty cool. The Fish Crew in Fort Collins is doing it. Aquatic Art in Denver is doing it. So, and I'm sure that most of the Denver stores are. I just don't quite follow them quite as close. I'm a little north of Denver. So I wish the best for those guys, and I've personally been supporting them. So I've been buying the local as much as possible. Looks like we have another question. I'm wondering, how big is your tank? So the display itself is 210 gallons. It's 6 feet by 2 feet by 30 inches. So pretty cool tank size. It's about the biggest I could fit in the space that I have. I could have gone with one of the 6-foot 300s, but it's on the second floor of my house, and without getting an engineer over, it's probably fine for the weight, but that's a lot of weight to put on the second floor. And then of course I have my sump and frag tanks and all of that plumbed into it. So total water volume with sumps, everything is 450 gallons. So it's a lot of weight. So or well, so it's downstairs, right? So it's a lot of water volume, but it's spread out. So the weight that's really a lot is downstairs. If this was all upstairs, I don't think it would really work very well. So that's kind of where I'm at. I've kind of got a spot. Well, it's kind of dirty, but I'll show you. Right over there, you can see all my junk, my little camera shelf and stuff like that. That would be a perfect place for another 6-foot tank. So I would love to see an upgrade on that someday, but we'll see how things go. Right now, it's just not going to happen. I don't have the time. I do like the fact that if I was to put it there, I could plumb it all together, and basically it's one tank to service. Where I really run into problem is when I set up multiple tanks. Like one tank for me, I can easily handle. Two, pretty good. If I go beyond two, like I don't do a good job with some of them, right? There's always one that it's not going right, or I don't care about it, or I did something I didn't like about it. I'm not interested in it. Who knows? But there's always one that doesn't do good. So I always try to keep it limited. Expanding on the one would be pretty cool because at least it uses the same filtration, same water quality, same everything. Really, all I'm doing is in just managing the box of glass, which wouldn't be so bad. So, let's see, do we have any more questions? I don't see any more questions. So, unless you guys got something, I think we are probably good to call it. Yeah, so be safe out there. Support your local stores. Take advantage of the deals and deliveries. And I will see you guys on the next episode of Mile High Reefers. Oh, and what I'm going to go do right now, I'm going to go cut some coral and play with these. You guys have been asking about it. It's going to happen. See ya.